Good day wishes to all. This presentation is meant for third semester BA BSc students of Calicut University. My effort is to assist these students with their common course, the course code A05. The prescribed textbook is Signatures, which is a very interesting and inspiring book structured with 3 modules to it. The first module we have autobiographical writings and memoirs. Memoirs means any writing which recalls a particular incident or any memory from a person. The second module of the text is speeches and testimonies, and the third module is about diary entries and letters. The collections have been designed with clear objectives, encouraging readers to reflect, think, and grow through introspection. Introspection means looking inward to understand one's own thoughts and emotions, to unlock the ability to analyze and think critically, to enhance intellectual ability and aesthetic sensibility. Now remember, aesthetic sensibility cannot be developed without reading and clear understanding. It's a matter of taste and style, and it has much to do with the reader's relationship to the text, which helps us to create meaning from and within the text. So it's our personal experience with the text, which is why we need to reflect upon what we read. And the fourth objective is to understand how personal narratives intersect with the larger social realities. When we take our reading to develop aesthetic sensibility and critical thinking ability, it's easy to attain this objective. So studying the modules is not only about getting summaries, but much more than that, adding more to your understanding of differences, the world with all its diversity, and life and its meanings, which varies from person to person. In short, the common course must transform you to a more accommodating, understanding individual with analytical capabilities. To know why Jeanette Armstrong has been included under autobiographical writings and memoirs, we must know the meaning of native literature, indigenous aboriginal culture, and its importance. Indigenous people are also known as First People, who are the ethnic groups or who are the original, earliest known inhabitants of an area. They have a way of life different from those who have settled or occupied or colonized these areas. Any literature that refers to works written by these indigenous people can be called as native literature. This is what makes Jeanette Armstrong a writer we will enjoy reading. For her, writing is both a healing and a connecting process. She believes the best way to bridge our differences is to touch and to understand. This alone will help the world alter their deep-rooted prejudices and wrong notions or concepts associated with Aboriginal people, or for that matter, anyone outside their own community. It's a mission to educate young people about native culture and history. This understanding will help the world get rid of cultural blindness. That is a word you should try to know, cultural blindness. When we become culturally blind, we fail to acknowledge or understand differences, and our own culture limits us from seeing the views of other people and other cultures. So you can see from this slide that she writes with a purpose which you can connect with the possibility of expanding your own views, which can help us in introspection. Now remember, she is the first native woman novelist from Canada. She is an educationist and an indigenous civil rights activist. I stand with you against the disorder is about the Okanagans, a Native American people from the Canadian province of British Columbia. It is said that the place is known for its wineries and fruit orchards, and as the pictures reflect, it must be a beautiful landscape. Let's hope we can have real time experiences one day. Though it looks cold and mountainous and green, Jeanette Armstrong says that Okanagan is a very dry, hot place with two rocky mountain ranges, the Cascade Mountains on one side and the Selkirks on the other. The Columbia is the main river that flows through this land. Now, you know, a river can have many tributaries or many branches that flows through different parts of the land. Now, one such tributary of the Columbia River is the Kettle River. So, I repeat those terms. She talks about two mountain ranges her place is connected with, the Selkirk Mountains and the Cascades, and she mentions the main river that flows through the land, which is Columbia, and the Kettle River she mentions in the text is the tributary of the Columbia River in southeastern British Columbia in Canada and northeastern Washington in the United States. That is for your general understanding of geography. Now, moving on to the next slide. Beginning with the geographic description of Okanagan, she gets into her identity, stating that her father's people are mountain people who were hunters, and that she got her name from her great grandmother from the father's side of the family. Now, great grandmother means grandmother's or grandfather's mother. Her mother, on the other hand, is a river Indian, a tribe from the Kettle River people who are in charge of fisheries. So, though she is more associated with her father's side, she firmly believes that she has both rights and responsibilities to the river through her family education and her mother's birth. So, why is this identity important? Identity, is important for any individual, though sometimes we try to say we don't care, we do care about our identity. Now, for this particular Okanagan writer, she says her identity is important because it is connected to expectations as well, and it tells others what her responsibilities are, what her goal is, what must she carry, what to project, what she teaches and think about, what she must do and what she can't do. I think this is easy to reflect upon, even though we wish to do so many things by the spur of the moment or by impulse, we control ourselves from doing them quite often. Why? Because we fear or we are bothered about our identity in the society. So this way you can reflect upon what she talks about here. Everything that an Okanagan does is part of her identity. So the individual's identity is very important. Now from here on, she takes us on a journey to the Okanagan culture. She brings out the very distinctive features of the Okanagan identity, stating that it is difficult to replicate in English. I think that is easy for you to understand. Try to translate your identity into a foreign language or English. In that translation, the very life of the culture, the very spirit of the culture will be lost. So, but the closest rendering that can be stated is we are living and dreaming earth pieces. We are the ones who are land and dream together. We are dream, memory, and imagination. And she also states that dream is the closest word that approximates the Okanagan, but even dream doesn't mean dream in English. On the other hand, it means, as she says, the unseen part of our existence as human beings. So it may be the mind, spirit, or the intellect. She is telling us it cannot be replicated into English. So when she states that it cannot be replicated in English, she is trying to say that the culture is way beyond the physical aspects that we see and way beyond what another language can tell us. So she says they are dream, memory, and imagination. We are land and dream together. Maybe we can connect it to the concrete and the abstract. We are what you see and we are what you cannot see. Now, to make it more clear, she uses an analogy. An analogy means a comparison. Using this analogy, she explains the deep sense of connection each Okanagan respects as part of their identity, the dream parts of them forming their community. So, what is that analogy? The comparison she makes here is the process of making twine, thread, or coiled baskets, placing a number of strands together and rubbing our hands together to bind them to a single strand. So is each Okanagan in the community he or she belongs to and the environment. An individual is inseparable from the land and community that he belongs to. So, by using this analogy, she is trying to clarify the inseparable bond every Okanagan has with his or her family and community. And to make this even more strong and solid, she says that when this sacred bond is lost, the result is chaos and confusion. Now, I have added a quote on this slide. This is not from the text. She says, I fear those who are unemotional and I solicit emotional response wherever I can. I do not stand silently by. I stand with you against the disorder. So, in the use of the word unemotional, and when she says, I solicit the emotional response wherever I can, she is again reinforcing the concept of connection or the bonds with everything that is around an Okanagan's existence. So that is what I have put on this slide. They lose their place when this identity or when this connection with the environment, the earth, and the fellow beings are forgotten. I think this is something we can learn or we must remember in our day-to-day life as well. Now, from there, she moves on to talk about individual capacities. So, initially, she explained her identity, and then she said her identity is incomplete without understanding the land, the dream, and the inseparable bond with land. And then she tries to explain what makes an individual. She says that each individual has 4 main capacities operating together. First one is the physical self, then the emotional self, and then the thinking or intellectual self and the spiritual selves. These 4 selves join each individual to the rest of the creation. Now, this is the essence of an individual, or you can imagine, to make it easy for you to understand, just imagine something with 4 compartments. Each compartment is important and each compartment has equal weightage. One is not above the other. So these are the 4 individual capacities that join an Okanagan to the rest of the creation. Now, how does the writer elucidate or explain these 4 capacities? These 4 capacities in an individual operate together, joining an individual to the rest of creation. Now, all these acting together, all these means all these 4 capacities acting together create a balanced individual. For example, she elucidates this towards the last part of the text. They believe that if the thinking capacity is not joined to the heart self or emotional self, its power can be destructive, not only to the individual but also to the larger selves surrounding them. So, developing each aspect of these capacities is very important for an Okanagan individual. Now let's see, in the text she explains the 3 selves. The spiritual self she doesn't explain, but we can understand that the spiritual self is a part of all these. When these 3 are developed, maybe it automatically leads to the development of the spiritual self. Now the physical self or the land dreaming capacity is referring to the body. The body is considered sacred by the Okanagans. It is considered the very core of every human being, and the Okanagan word for body means the land dreaming capacity. It is the body that permits the rest of the body to be. The body, which comprises of the flesh, the blood, and the bones, is earth itself. Because it is the earth itself, it is part of all cycles of the earth, including the vast forces that we only glimpse. So all elements that are present in nature are present in us in different forms. When our body fails to continue as an individual life form, it dissipates back to the larger self, which is the earth itself. So remember, the Okanagans consider the body as sacred and the very core of the individual being. The second one is the emotional self. The emotional self in Okanagan language translates as the heart. This is the capacity to form bonds. Now, what aspects does an Okanagan have to form bonds with? They have to form bonds with people, with the land, and all things that surround them and that they are part of. So the capacity to bond is created by the emotional self. So heart is the closest word to the emotional self. It is the capacity to form bonds with people, with the land, and all the things that surround them and that they are part of. The third self is the thinking or intellectual self. And Jeanette Armstrong says that their Okanagan word for thinking, logic, and memory is difficult to translate into English. Now, whenever she says it is difficult to translate into English, we have to understand she is reinforcing the idea that every culture or every language is the representation of a culture. The writer tries to bring out how strongly bound is the language and the culture, and hence highlights the distinctive nature of the native Okanagan lives and beliefs which needs to be preserved. So the thinking intellectual self is the spark that ignites, and that is the closest word she gives to the thinking intellectual capacity. It is this self that ignites the memory and other capacities of an individual. Or, in other words, every action that an Okanagan performs is directed by the spark of memory, by logic, which in turn is ignited by the intellectual self. So, every action is ignited by the thinking intellectual self through logic, through memory, and through analytical thinking. So, all these together form the thinking intellectual self. Now, I would say this is something that we can all relate to. Then she goes on to talk about the Okanagan educational practices, or what is unique. That is the question you can see in your text. The paragraph question asks you, what is unique about the Okanagan educational practices? The traditional Okanagan education, as the writer says, lays huge emphasis on discipline. Education helps one to engage beyond automatic response capacity. So, I think this is what I feel. Automatic response capacity may be referring to impulsive behavior or instinctive behavior. Through education, through discipline, we learn to control our impulses and our instinctive responses. This may help you to understand. Education helps one to engage beyond automatic response capacity. To achieve this, one must be disciplined to work jointly with the other selves. The Okanagans believe in the balancing of the self by joining the thinking capacity to the heart. Failing to achieve this can make the individual destructive to himself and to the larger selves around. She sums up the importance of education by stating that a fire that is not controlled can destroy. So, just as fire can both destroy and preserve, human capacities are also capable of destruction and construction, or building creatively. So, I think this is again something that we can reflect to and think about seriously in our own lives. In the last two paragraphs, the writer brings out the importance of family, community, and relationships to the Okanagans. The most serious teaching is that in every choice an Okanagan makes, community comes first, then family, only then the individual. So, even if we want to make an individual choice, we cannot make that choice ignoring the family and the community, because they believe all individual actions affect the family and community, and without the bond to these two means without the bond to the family and community, an individual is considered crippled, incapacitated, and lifeless. Look at the powerful words that she has used. When an individual believes that he is isolated and that he is not connected to the family or the community, he becomes crippled, incapacitated. Incapacitated means deprived of strength or power. He becomes powerless. So the power of an individual is that sense of belonging. When that is gone, the individual becomes lifeless. I think that's a beautiful concept that comes out of togetherness and the bond with fellow beings and the environment around us. So the capacity to bond is considered critical for individual well-being. You lose it and you lose your well-being. The Okanagan word for relationship to others in English is our one skin. And they also believe that not to have a family or a community is to be scattered or falling apart. Now, this is the English equivalent for relationship in Okanagan language, she calls it our one skin. And when she talks about relationship, she says that these people, the Okanagans, share beyond a geographical or a physical space they occupy. Beyond that, they all share a physical tie that is uniquely human. So look at the sense of connection, or the integral part of an Okanagan's existence is the bond that he establishes with fellow beings and the surroundings. When this is gone, he loses the human quality. That is what she says. We all share a physical tie that is uniquely human. This is capable only for human beings. Now, besides this, like the spokes of a wheel, Okanagans respect their bond with their forefathers and ancestors and the generations to come. Remember, in the initial slide we mentioned, it is their identity that decides what she must teach and what she must carry. So every individual has the responsibility of respecting those people who lived before them and the generations who are yet to come, because all of them share their flesh, share the same flesh. The text winds up with the powerful assertion that without community and family, we are truly not human. So the element of humanity is totally balanced upon the connections an Okanagan has with the family, the community, the earth, the environment, the surroundings, and everything that he's connected with, which means the seen and the unseen. So I think that makes a very rich selection at your age to reflect upon. Now, a quick look at the source and objective of the text. This is an article that appeared in yesmagazine.org, posted by the writer on November 8, 2005. And the writer shows her unflinching loyalty to the Okanagan, the indigenous community, and at the same time she declares her solidarity against the violence of cultural imperialism. When we talk about cultural imperialism, it means the feeling of being superior which certain cultures inculcate in themselves. So cultural imperialism is the practice of imposing the culture of a politically or economically influential nation over a less powerful society. For example, the superiority of the whites over other tribes in America. So she is declaring her solidarity against the violence of cultural imperialism through this piece of writing. On a wider angle, we can also say that the writer is fighting the destructive effects of materialistic global economy. Now, what is wrong with materialistic global economy? This materialistically oriented global economy tends to generalize. In this process of generalizing, our sense or our awareness of existence of diverse subcultures is obscured. We forget, we fail to see the differences that exist around us. Her writing has a strong purpose of protecting diversity by revitalizing these subcultures. So this may be looked upon as an attempt to reclaim the Okanagan culture. Now let's look at the basic objective of your text to reflect, analyze and introspect. What do we take away from this Okanagan memoir? Are the terms cultural imperialism and cultural blindness applicable to our Indian context? What are the concepts that we grow up with? Can you draw any similarity with the Okanagan beliefs? So for reflection and analysis, here is some food for thought. Just think about it. In this global economy, is generalization really harmful? Shouldn't we be celebrating differences and valuing diversity rather than trying to remove differences and create generalizations? I think I have tried to help you all with this beautiful text. Remember, this presentation is not a replacement for your textbook. Kindly read your textbook as many number of times as you can. If you have anything that I should know, please write to me at mkvinitha@outlook.com. Thank you all. Stay home, stay safe.